you say, I believe in the non-aggression principle. I believe that the only ethical use of violence is in defense. If that's the case, then you cannot make a minarchist argument for taxes or anything else, because it goes against that very foundation. And it goes against the foundation of all libertarianism, which is property rights. It extends from property rights. You yourself are your first property, and no one has the right by any authority, whether they say it's God or man has given them, to violate your right over your property. So that is a necessarily anarchist position. If you are anything other than anarchist, you are that many degrees off of libertarianism. I know people don't like to hear that, but that's the case.
I'm moving house today. It's been 2 years, 8 months and 28 days, and I've got to say that as I step off the bus for what could be the last time spent as sitting in your boss supermarket queues, etc. And I have to say though, it's only today that I'm glad to be leaving. I really will miss the when Santa, Santa, today I'm sad, but tomorrow I'll be glad when Santa, when Santa.
You're listening to truthconduit.com with Chris Macmillan.
Hey everybody, Chris Macmillan here, and this is another episode of truthconduit.com. This is episode 19, and I am speaking to Sherry Voluntary. Sherry Clark is her name. She's got a widely popular show called the Sherry Voluntary Show, and we had a great discussion about a lot of philosophical terms in regards to freedom and ideas of freedom and what freedom should be, shouldn't be. We talk about what it means, collectivism, anarchy, voluntarism, the non-aggression principle. What else? Statism, her journey from being a statist to a voluntarist or anarchist, however you want to, whichever definition best suits you. There are so many definitions, and speaking of which, we talked a lot about misconceptions around these definitions, particularly around what is considered to be what is a libertarian. And she talks about how she's kind of backing out of the Sherry Voluntary Show, but she's still keeping her other show, Postcards from Somalia. And yeah, it was a lively discussion. There's a lot of links to check out, because we named a lot of names, talked about a lot of books, a lot of ideas, not limited, not to mention John Taylor Gatto, John Holt, Murray Rothbard, Larkin Rose. Again, check out all the show notes, all the links. There's a lot to go on there, a lot of leads. So enjoy the interview, and thanks for watching. Bye. Hey everybody, Chris Macmillan here. I'm with Sherry Voluntary of the Sherry Voluntary Show. Sherry, how are you doing? How's the weather in Tennessee this morning?
It's great. I'm well, thank you. And thanks for having me on the show. It's cold. It's very cold here right now, but it was like 60 the other day, which is unusual for December, but then it was 30 the next day. So it's kind of rough on us old people.
Do you get much snow up there in Knoxville?
No, not really. We get dustings generally. Sometimes we'll have something that sticks, but yeah, generally it's just not much. It doesn't stick around. So
yeah, cool. Well, Sherry, your show, what's going on with it? You've been going for some time. I mean, your interviews go way back several years, and now you're kind of going through some changes with the Sherry Voluntary Show. Do you want to talk a bit about that?
Sure. I guess this is my first public announcement, but I think I'm going to quit doing it. There's a lot of factors, some focusing on some things with health and family and things like that. But also, I put a lot of work into doing this. You know how difficult it is to do a show and do it consistently and put out a certain level of quality content. And, I'm just not getting the support that I would like. I get a lot of, where we're really glad you're around and keep up the good work and I love your work and blah, blah, blah. You get all these, which are nice and wonderful. And yes, I love that. But financial support is something that I personally need in order to keep going, doing this. So it hasn't really been what I needed to be. So I'm going to pull back and refocus, just kind of figure out what I'm going to do next and see what I can't come up with.
Yeah, I mean, it's exciting. You've been there, you've done that, you went for it, and you're extremely popular on your show. I mean, you get a lot of followings. Everybody just, I met you in Dallas, and everybody knew who you were, coming up, taking photos. You just kind of lit up the room. So, but I mean,
it's weird.
I mean, it's not a negative thing. You've done this for a while, and who knows, you can always just come back anytime and pick it up, reinvent yourself. Your show had you've done a lot of episodes. You've talked to a lot of people. What's the common denominator for your show that everybody has pretty much in common?
You mean my guests or
Yes.
the follower?
Yeah.
I'd say they're all anti-state. That's pretty much my requirement for having guests. I don't generally have guests that I'm debating with at all. That's not really my style. I do more just informative type interviews where I'm trying to get, highlight other people and their work, people that I personally love and follow. And like, for example, Keith Preston, who he has a lot of libertarian stands. He comes from the left. He does attack the system, in case anyone doesn't know. He's amazingly intelligent. Is a professor and has been doing this for a long time, but he's not an anarcho-capitalist, but he's anti-state for sure, and he professes pan-anarchism, and I would suggest everyone check out Attack the System. There's some great content there, a lot to learn, but he's anti-state and pro-individual, I guess, is the other caveat. I think if you're anti-state, you're generally pro-individual, but
well, you once said, I mean, you said it yourself, and I agree completely. Everybody deep down is an anarchist because it's the natural state of human existence. We've just been molded into this thing that's going on. And you were doing some work with Larkin Rose recently at the Candles in the Dark. What was that about?
Well, I would love to do work with Larkin, but I didn't. I just attended the seminar. So Candles in the Dark is really, it's kind of an interesting take on getting our message out there. And I think it's brilliant. And I think that the next project I do is where I'm definitely going to try and apply the principles. And I think the biggest thing that I took away from it is, it's something I've said many times. I want to be effective in my communication, and you can be correct all day, but that doesn't make you effective. And so this, I think, is a way of doing that, of being effective by engendering within the person those questions, bringing things to their mind that they never may have considered, just by asking questions in a way that helps them to figure it out. Because look, we're libertarians and voluntarists, most of us. So it's a way for that person to not have those mental blocks thrown up of, oh, you're attacking my police, so I have to hate you. Yeah, my roads. Like, because human nature is to put people in a box. And especially when you have heightened political discourse like we do in our country, then people are they're looking for ways to put you in a box. Is this someone that agrees with me or not? And I find this even within the libertarian community, where if you don't use the words that people are expecting, they will label you and think of you as something that you're not. So like the word between self-ownership and personal autonomy. I've used both of those, and both left and right have kind of scolded me a little bit on that, because the left sees self-ownership as slavery, which is ridiculous. But the right, when they hear personal autonomy, they're like, well, I believe in self-ownership. Well, yeah, I mean, that's what it's just a different way of communicating it. So I think that's just natural for people to look for what box you're in and whether they need to fight or flee or whatever, or agree with you, or if you're an ally. So I think this is a way of it's a much, much gentler approach. And it's very difficult in a lot of ways. Because, most people I think that are libertarians or are anarchists are passionate about what we do or what we talk about, or else we wouldn't bring it up because it's a hassle, right? Like it's a thing. So I think that people, because we're passionate, we often can be really, really aggressive with our language and and look, sometimes that's called for. I'm not, trying to nanny you on don't say those words. And I'm not the word police. I'm not the tactic police. You choose tactics based on the situation and what you're trying to accomplish. If you're trying to be effective, especially with people in person, I think the best approach is a soft one, to ask questions, to engender their own. And sometimes it's hard to listen to what they say because we've argued against it so many times. We understand what they're saying is such BS that it's difficult to sit there and listen to. But we have to remember that these people are individuals who are victims of the indoctrination of the state. And do we want to help them or not? Do we want to help them, or do we want to feel superior by knowing more and being woke, And so that's what I took away from it. And it's a little difficult for me to do sometimes because I want to shake people and go, stop it. But that's not really libertarian.
How does this indoctrination happen, Sherry?
Oh, I'd say the biggest way is public school.
Yeah.
Of course. That whole system of indoctrination. I mean, there's so much to that, but also because we have generations through public school now, it's enforced at home, even from the time people are babies, because you've got an indoctrinated generation teaching the next indoctrinated generation before they even get to school. And then they learn the new indoctrination at school. So it's reinforced over and over.
It's a hard shell to break out of. It really is. And that's why it's even more satisfying when one does, I've been in that situation in the bar. I've got a left-wing friend. I've got a conservative friend. And at the end of the night, they're both looking at me like I'm crazy,
They realize how much
I'm
they
sitting
agree.
there going, yes, I'm uniting these guys against me. This is great. Because the idea that, just the whole concept of a world without without government basically is beyond their comprehension.
Yeah.
Because they both need that entity to do whatever make whatever ends to get things done.
Right.
It's
violence is the go-to
yeah.
for anyone who has been indoctrinated. That's what you do. You use violence. That's why parenting styles are authoritarian. And I think about when, our great grandparents, if most people, they think about the good old days, right? But they miss where it was really good because it was really good because people took care of themselves. People were responsible for their own crap, and communities helped each other and they took care of each other for the most part. Like there are always outliers, and anarchism is not utopia. It doesn't solve all the world's problems, but it does offer the best opportunity for every individual. So that's where I think we really have to kind of get people, because when we talk about anarchism, because it's idealistic, it's not seeable really easily in the world to people right now who aren't already convinced of it, that they think, oh, you're talking about utopia. But no, we are talking about a system that would vastly increase the freedom of every individual and vastly increase their ability to make their way in life, and therefore their incentives to do that. So it should incentivize people because they have more opportunities and there's more ways for them to do things, and they're less limited by regulation and other, silly things that people will do more for themselves. There's not the incentive to live off the government or someone else. There's the incentive to produce and have your own, because you're always going to be more profitable in doing your own thing or working, and than you are taking a
Yeah,
system.
it's a philosophy. It's a way of life.
Yes.
The non-aggression principle. Just, I do not have the right to infringe on other people, nor do they have the right to infringe upon me. And call it what you will. That's what it boils down to.
Yeah.
But if you apply logic and reasoning to it, it pretty much obliterates the existence of any government, because, like you said, they cannot exist without violence or the threat of violence.
Yeah.
And
that's all they are.
yeah.
It's a system of violence. It's really a code of violence. And I think, the non-aggression principle, it's a human structure. Of course, it doesn't exist outside of a man's mind. But that is something, if you're going to have, human constructs, as people call it, which I think have gotten a bad rap, because everything really, like all the social things we do are human constructs. They're ways for people to live together. People desire peace. And so, even when you have like the gruff biker guy, say, I just want to be left alone. What is that but a desire for peace? Really, it's everybody wants that in their lives. So how is it that people can cohabitate in, whatever area peacefully is really important. And so I think one thing that's often missed about the non-aggression principle is that it's sort of a theory of what the appropriate use of violence is. So what it's telling you is that the only appropriate use of violence, the only ethical use, is in defense of yourself or your property or
Exactly.
someone else.
Every living creature in the animal kingdom has some mechanism of self-defense. It's just it's unnatural to not have that, because that's the way Mother Earth was made. That's the way all nature was made. So what say you environmentalists about that?
Yeah.
It is fascinating. The porcupine has the spikes. The skunk's got the stench. This last night, I literally, I live out in the country in Texas. I was walking through the dark and I almost stepped on a possum. And, they've got,
at you?
Yeah, they've got interesting self-defense mechanisms. So what about people, we have the right to self-defense. Yeah, you're right. Sorry, I interrupted you though.
No, that's fine. Yeah, I think that sometimes violence is the answer. Like that's what people tend to forget, is that there is a place for violence. Now, whether it's wise to use violence or not, I guess what I'm getting at is that a lot of people take like the non-aggression principle and different, property rights things. They take them as blanket statements that they want to see them as black and white. And I certainly don't see it that way. I think there is a strong line of what is ethical use of violence and what's not. But, you have some of the neckbeardier types that will argue children are property, you can sell them, different weird things. And I think it's mostly to be edgy, because in a real world scenario, people just, that doesn't very often come up. And you just can't take anything like that and make it the end all of your morality. That's what I'm getting at. So for myself, I see non-aggression and self-ownership, property rights, as the beginning of morality, not the end. That's not where we end. It's where we begin, because there are questions that are difficult to answer with those. And that's where other morality, other systems kick in. And so, say if you're a Christian and you're, technical Bible believing Christian, then yes, maybe you believe sex before marriage is immoral. So that's the way you would live your life, hopefully, if that's what you believe. But if you're not, then there's no morality telling you that that's not appropriate, that you can't do that. So I think that that's where we have to remember that in a society like we would have, or we would wish for, people will be allowed to live in the way that they see fit. And those other moralities will kick in, and you'll tend to congregate with people who have shared beliefs and ways of living.
And a major factor with all this is people are naturally good people. People generally don't, of course there's always an exception. People are naturally good people and don't want to hurt other people. But the society seems to be demanding otherwise. You know, all
Yeah.
of the constructs of society,
Yeah.
just even in the most indirect way, people go and they vote for their next ruler, and they don't
Mhm.
realize they're just perpetuating a never-ending system of violence and
Right.
misery.
Yeah. Because any good that they can do, like, I'm not going to say that there's not some good done in the political process sometimes. What I would see as good anyways, like, deregulation or stopping whatever. The 10th Amendment Center, I think, is a good example of that. They've used legislation, model legislation, getting politicians to do certain things that, stop an NSA facility. Is that good? Yes. But in the end, they're using the system that is to try and protect people. That's a defensive use, which, okay. But I used to be I love Lysander Spooner, and I used to sort of ascribe to his defensive voting idea. I don't anymore, but I still respect his work greatly. And the reason I don't is that when you put someone in power like that, can they do some good? Maybe. But they also, the bad that they do and that they have the potential to do is far outweighs any good that they could do. So I'm not willing to do that and to condone that, because what is a vote but condoning that? And look, we've had 200 and something years of voting in this country, and are we freer today than we were than people were then? I don't think so. My great grandparents, my grandparents were freer in many, many aspects than we are right now. And I think that, it's the incrementalism of law and how people don't see themselves as less free. But if you think about it, they didn't have as many restrictions on them. I think it's one of the good examples of this is happening in Virginia right now, where, with the whole gun confiscation thing that's going on, and the people there that are standing up, and police officers who have said, we will not enforce this. We're not coming to take your guns. And so the politicians say, well, we're going to bring in the National Guard, all that. I guess it's sort of calming down now, but, I can see how some people might use that as an example of, well, see, police aren't the bad guys. They're not going to take your guns. Not in this instance, when it was turned up, the heat was turned to high right away. No, but every day we see them practicing red flag laws in other states and not standing against unconstitutional gun laws right now. So the thing is that it's how slowly the heat is turned up, how incremental, because I really believe that the only reason that police had said this in this case was that it was the state made a mistake in turning the heat up way too fast. The Democrats that were elected there got overzealous, and they it's easy for politicians to forget who the American people are, right? They live in the beltway of, Virginia, whatever. They deal with politicians all the time, so they forget who real people really are. And real people generally, from my experience, and I've lived north, south, east, and west in this country, most people want the right to protect themselves. Out in the further away you get from the cities, the more that becomes true. So you awake a sleeping giant for sure when you start that stuff.
And to keep in mind the bigger picture is also important. I don't know how many people are aware of there is an agenda. There really is. And that has been proven beyond a shadow of a doubt by the history that we were never taught in public school, going all the way back to Cecil Rhodes and, the Milner boys, and it just spilled over to the Council on Foreign Relations. And we've got Agenda 21, all
Mr.
of
Bill
this
Weld.
disgusting technocratic, the plans that they have clearly laid out. It's not a conspiracy. Just go to the Rio Summit 1992. It's all laid out there. And then you see it happening now, bit by bit. It's all, anyway, it helps to keep the bigger picture in mind, to keep the why in check. Why are these issues so important? Sherry, were you ever a statist? What were some of your earlier influences? Tell us about the path from statism to where you are now, to freedom, basically.
Right. So, yeah, I was a total statist. I was a, flag waving, neocon for many, many years. And because I had been raised that way, honestly. I mean, there were aspects of me that I look back now and I go, these were always anti-authoritarian. Like, I always had an issue with school. I barely graduated high school because I missed so many days. And I told them it was against my religion to go to the doctor. So it was kind of funny. But there were always aspects of me that were sort of anti-authoritarian, but in some ways I had a very dysfunctional home life growing up, and I was looking for love and security and acceptance. And the military really makes you feel that way. And I was in ROTC for 3 years in high school, almost 4 years. And on their special teams, I was really involved, and I was very close with the sergeant majors that ran the program, and they were wonderful. And they really did do a lot for me personally, to help me feel good about myself. Everybody wants to do that. But the price that you pay for that is really high. And I almost did go into the Marine Corps or the Army. I was trying to decide. And thank God, it's the best thing that ever didn't happen to me was going in the military. But, I really saw myself as someone who was wanting to serve people, and that's where they get you. They tell you can better yourself. You can go to college, which my parents couldn't pay for college. I always knew if I was going to do anything, I had to do it myself.
Yeah.
And I could see the world, like, cause I love to travel and, I was going to help people. And, they tell those lies for a reason, because young people, they're idealistic, and they really do want to make the world better in general. So, that was where I sort of came from. And then for years I was in a religious cult, organization, whatever you want to call it, from the time I was 13 till 3 or 4 years ago. So 27 years. And, that too was, I see now looking back, was my desire for acceptance and love and structure, and those things that people, I want to give to my kids. I think most people want to give that to their children. So it really left me vulnerable to those things, and that all played into my statism. There were times when I would think, like, wow, this really isn't, like, I don't know if this is the right thing. But you go, well, the church knows better, or the government knows better. I don't know all the factors, so therefore I'm going to do this. So those little things in the back of people's minds were taught in those systems. And the reason I bring up the religious situation is because the state is the most dangerous religion, as we know. Larkin put it so beautifully.
Yeah, the most dangerous superstition. Yeah.
Yeah. So that we often put aside our gut instincts, which are often correct, and do things in the guise of the common good that we wouldn't do otherwise. And that's exactly what the military is. That's exactly what many of the things I did in the group were. So they are very similar. And I think that being in that group gave me an understanding right away of what the state was. Once I came to it, it was very quickly, once I became a libertarian, I was very quickly an anarchist, because I was coming out of that group. Libertarianism really helped me come out of that.
You know the joke, don't you?
Yeah, the 6 months.
Yeah, the difference between an anarchist and libertarian. What's the difference?
Yeah, 6 months.
About 6 months, yeah.
Yeah, it took me less than that, even. And I think because the military was the last thing I was really holding on to, though. Because I thought, well, we have to defend ourselves. I was still thinking in that terms of our country, and these things. So that was really sort of my path. And I started listening to Tom Woods, and coming into libertarianism that way, I think, was really helpful, because that's such an academic side of libertarianism, is the sort of Tom Woods Mises crowd. And so it gave me a really, really great understanding of libertarianism, what it is, and introduced me to a lot of really wonderful thinkers and doers within the movement. So that was where I really came into libertarianism, and since have branched out and sort of read and done a lot more. But that's basically my path, I think. And it's still growing. I'm
Yeah.
still learning things. So.
What are some, you've got your own show. What are some shows that you regularly follow that you get a lot of value from these days?
None. That's one of the reasons I'm stepping back, because I feel like, there are shows I like and that I will listen to occasionally, especially if something catches my eye.
Well, you follow Tom Woods, for example.
I just don't have the time anymore. And I hear this from, and I'm just being honest, like a lot of podcasters will say, I don't have time to listen to other podcasts anymore. We don't, it takes a lot of time to do this, y'all. People don't get it, but, I do. And I think everybody does, like listen to something occasionally. Maybe some people are better at following other shows than I am and do their own podcasts, because I do too right now. But I will generally like listen to episodes of shows that I hear, oh, this one was really good, or somebody will send me something and I'll listen to that. I try to listen to the things people send to me or read them.
Okay. So you don't have, there's not a, right now there's no fix, like every morning you wake up and bam, open this site, see what's new. That's not going on.
I'm not that disciplined for one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a scattered person in many ways. Anyways, my focus is, I hyper focus on some things, and then everything else sort of is out in the wasteland of my brain. But
cool.
I had a head injury once, and I think I want to blame it on that, but maybe it's just my personality too. I'm more of a broad strokes person a lot of times, but I'm working on that, getting more organized, and because I think that was part of it. My priorities get shifted, and my kids are my priority. And so I'm trying to rebalance my life and reprioritize, and maybe fit podcasting in a way that is more fits well within my life without it taking over my life. Because when I started, I guess I didn't mention that, I started with a radio show called Speaking Freely. And that was sort of, I didn't go after that. It fell in my laps. I was asked to do this show, and that was great. Like, it was a great experience. It's something I had thought about radio when I was younger. I thought maybe because I love music and I know a lot about it. And I thought maybe I'll be like a DJ or something, on the radio, because that'd be a good job for me. But I never pursued it. And then years later, this fell into my lap. And so that was where it started, the podcasting ball rolling. After that show was canceled, we started the podcast to keep the momentum.
And were you, about this time, had you come full circle? Would you say you were full-blown voluntarist at this point?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I was already using the name Sherry Voluntary. And I picked that. I started a Facebook page with that because I didn't want to drive my family and friends from my old normie life crazy, because it's hard when you change and people around you don't, and you can damage relationships. And look, I value the relationships of the people in my life, even before I was a libertarian, and I respect them and I love them. And so I try to communicate the things that I believe to them. Everybody knows who I am, right? But no, I don't mean it in that way. Like, my family knows who I am. I've talked to them. It's not like I'm shy about it, but it's not fair of me to just change and say, damn it, you're going to listen to what I have to say, and you're going to respect it, and you're going to agree with it, or we're done because you're violent status. Like, no, they are victims of the same system that I was a victim of. And to have that sort of point of view, I think, is really self-centered and selfish. And, if you want to live that way, fine, that's your life and your relationships. But my relationships are important to me. And my family has my brother's basically an anarchist now. I mean, he might have actually been more of one before I was, but, they've come around to a lot of things. They're not libertarians or voluntarists, but those relationships can stay sweet. And I would just encourage everyone to try and keep those relationships in your life, because those things are really important to being a human and to having happiness in your life. And if you shut off everyone because their belief system is based on violence, then you've got to shut out the world. And I don't want to do that. There's no way to have an inroad with those people if you're not, acting with some kindness and love and respect. Everybody wants that. And I think families kind of deserve that if they've tried to do their best. My family wasn't the greatest growing up, but our relationships are better now. And it takes some give and take, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, well said. And you're homeschooling as well.
Mm-hmm.
From what you described to me about, like, for example, what your son's getting involved with, he sounds like he's incredibly independent and
Yes.
innovative. Have you always homeschooled?
No. So we started becoming a libertarian, and I had heard a little about homeschooling or whatever, but it was really scary. And I think that's, people don't, even when you're a libertarian, I know a lot of libertarians who realize what's going on with the school system, but it's a difficult thing to do. You have to make room for it in your life. And it's scary to get them off that system, because you think, am I screwing my kid up? And I can make decisions for me, but am I screwing my kid up? And that was where I sort of was like, geez, this is like jumping off a cliff. But my son is really the one who instigated the whole thing. He hated school. He's very bright. He's an introverted type though, and he's shy, and he couldn't stand certain things about school. And so between 4th and 5th grade, he just said, can we please homeschool? I don't want to go back there. I was like, you know what? Let's do it. Let's try it. So we did, and it's been one of the best decisions ever. And then I learned more about why school is bad.
So you started doing it before finding out, for actually researching it. You just said, all right, let's do it. And then you started to, were you, did you come across the works of John Taylor Gatto and John Holt?
I don't. I may have seen something from John Holt for other people. John Taylor Gatto, I have read, and boy, if that's not the most powerful answer to why people need to get away from public schools, I don't know what is. A public school teacher, and a very good one at that, from their own standards, saying this isn't the best way to handle children. This isn't the right way to do things. It creates a lot of problems. And other things, I found that his work covers a lot else. Like, one of the best things I ever read from him, I thought, was that people don't have communities now. They have networks, and a network is not a community. And the difference is, a community knows its bums. And I love that.
Yeah.
Because that really goes to anarchism and the smaller communities that would necessarily be, you won't have these massive national governments when people aren't doing that. Like, it takes small communities, and to help each other and to decide their values. That's sort of an organic process that takes place.
Yeah, exactly. One of the
really
misconceptions about a voluntary society is, is we more important. I think we understand more importantly, more than anybody, the importance of community. We need each other. We need, it's individually minded people working together, making the most of their individual values that they add to make their community better. But no anarchist really wants to be alone. We all want to be part of a community. It's a big misconception about that.
Right. It's not, and I think even some anarchists, and I find this, younger men tend to have these types of ideas. What you start to realize in life is that people are meant to be together. We're social animals, right? We are. And so we need societies. But the difference is, when people hear you say something like community and we, like, there are appropriate uses for those words. We is an appropriate term when you're talking about communities sometimes. but people hear that and they think, oh, collectivist nonsense. And that's not it. There's a difference between having a collective and being a collectivist. So having a collective is a voluntary association of people that agree to whatever. Being a collectivist is saying that the collective's ideas and desires are more important than the individual. And that's the difference. So I think people have to really think about these things, about what they're actually saying. And you know, I love to talk about community. I love to talk about those aspects of, you know, sociology and those things. It's just something I'm more interested in. But, you know, no man is an island is true. And that's not what anarchists are trying to do. We are trying to assert that the individual's rights over themselves and the direction of their own life is the most important. But we are absolutely not trying to say that individuals can be taken out of any group and aren't, you know, should never have leadership. Like, leadership is another thing I've run up against. People like, we don't need leaders. No, you don't need rulers, but you do. Every society has leaders. That's what happens in any group. Look at apes. They have leaders. And those are people. There's the difference between appointed rulers, where the group says, this person's going to tell us everything we need to do. And now you have to do that thing too, because if you don't, we're going to beat you up. There's a difference in that, and a person who is good at something and rises to the top and earns people's respect, and people will value their opinion and maybe listen to them. That's different. That's actual leadership. And I know why people are so triggered in a way by those words, because they're used often to hurt people. Like, this is your leader and you have to respect the office, even if you don't respect the man, right? And this is the government. You have to do it. It's the government. It's for the common good. So maybe you don't like it, but that's the way it is, and blah, blah, blah. You know, those things are used to hurt people. So I get why they're cautious of those words, but I think people really have to rethink. Some people have to really rethink their aversion to these things, because they are just things that happen in life. You're going to have leadership, even in relationships. There's generally a leader in different areas. So,
yeah, well said, Sherry. That was beautifully explained. One more point on John Taylor Gatto. I just want to tell you this story. I read. It was just the random scrolling through Amazon. Yeah, I want a new book. And it caught my attention, Dumbing Us Down. This was long before having kids was even on my radar. So I ordered the book. I read it, and it planted some seeds in me. And I didn't know who John Taylor Gatto was. In fact, I read the book, and I wouldn't have been able to tell you. I said, who's the guy that wrote that? But I told myself, man, if I ever have kids, I'm going to have to look into this schooling thing. You know, it really, that was a serious early influence of, there was some serious seeds planted by reading that book.
Yeah.
You know, then fast forward and you've got, you know, the everything else that he's done, the underground history of American education, weapons of mass instruction. And of course, have you seen the documentary about him, with him, called The Ultimate History Lesson with John Taylor Gatto? It was a Tragedy and Hope production. Richard Grove interviews him for 5 hours. And they just off the cusp talking about the things that he has done. It's an excellent must-see production, I think. And it's really they do a good job of the sourcing it. I mean, everything is sourced, every reference that is mentioned.
Wow.
It's 5 hours long, but it goes by very quickly. It's very intriguing. It's free on YouTube. Yeah. It's
I have to check that out.
Absolutely fantastic. Yeah. Richard, they reached out to him. He was much older. I believe it was 2009, 2008 when they flew him over and had a couple of days with him. I definitely recommend it. His books as well. John Holt, I tell people, John Taylor Gatto, you want to know what's wrong with you want to know the history of American public education and what it's really all about? John Taylor Gatto. Whereas if you want to get down to the nitty gritty of what you can and can't do actually in the home education system, John Holt's very good at that. He gets down to really, it's almost boring, technical, what to do. He used Cuisenaire rods for developing math skills, for example.
Right,
but yeah, what's his most famous book? How Children Fail and How Children Learn. Those are his two.
Okay, I think I have actually heard of that, How Children Fail, before.
Yeah.
I've got a reading list a mile long, and I bet you that's tucked in there.
Me too. Yeah, me too.
So
do you have any recommended reading, Sherry, for anyone?
Gosh.
Imagine someone's listening to this going, what are they talking about?
Right.
What would you recommend?
Well, in general, I almost always go to The Most Dangerous Superstition and Anatomy of the State. Also The Law. That's another one that I think is really
Frederic
good, but
Bastiat.
yeah,
The Most Dangerous Superstition by Larkin Rose. And Anatomy of the State
is Rothbard.
Yeah, Murray Rothbard. Yep.
So those are wonderful. If you're really already kind of on the path of what is this stuff, like if it's piqued your interest, because I think a thing that a lot of people who start out in libertarianism, like they hear about it through the LP or whatever, and they get a really twisted view that, libertarianism is a centrist position, and it is not. I cannot express that enough. It's a whole different animal. We are not the middle. We're not a little bit Democrat and a little bit Republican. So it's just the right Goldilocks mix. That's just bullshit, utter tripe. I cannot express that enough. It makes me upset. Anyways, and I think the LP has actively taught people that, and by the phrases, the things they use, like what is the one where they say we're fiscally conservative and socially liberal, and those are positions that may or may not be true. Not every libertarian is socially liberal, which I don't have a problem with, but that's the thing. It's not a blanket centrist position. So, or let's say that all libertarians would be for people, say gay people, being able to get married because it's none of our business. That doesn't mean that personally they might not have religious aversion to that or whatever, but that's allowable. People can disagree and believe things, but the point is they won't use the state to stop you from doing what you're doing as consenting adults. There we go. So
very good. Well said, Sherry.
Where was I going with this? Because I got all
the misconceptions about the word libertarianism, I believe. It's misunderstood.
Yeah. Yes, that libertarian thought, we're not a centrist position, we're a different animal, and that I think the LP has done that, and maybe they weren't trying to.
Just to clarify, when you say LP, you mean the Libertarian Party?
Yes. Yeah. Yes. And so as people like us, I think like Larkin's book is a great thing for a new libertarian to read, because it gives you the anti-authoritarian aspect that you need to learn to understand libertarianism. Libertarianism is necessarily anarchist. It has to be, because if you make the statement, and this is, I've made this several times with the minarchist crowd or people who hate anarchists in their party, which I think is hilarious. The party started by anarchists, but anyways, that, what are the caveats to the non-aggression principle? Tell me what those are. Because if you say, I believe in the non-aggression principle, I believe that the only ethical use of violence is in defense. If that's the case, then you cannot make a minarchist argument for taxes or anything else, because it goes against that very foundation. And it goes against the foundation of all libertarianism, which is property rights. It extends from property rights. You yourself are your first property, and no one has the right by any authority, whether they say it's God or man has given them, to violate your right over your property. So that is a necessarily anarchist position. If you are anything other than anarchist, you are that many degrees off of libertarianism. I know people don't like to hear that, but that's the case. Yeah. The end.
Very, very good.
My little rant there. It just, I don't want to drive people away from libertarianism by that. Yeah. But what I want to do is make it clear that to say you're a libertarian should be to say you are an anarchist. But the party, when you have a party, which I think the reasons it was started, from my understanding, to give anarchists a voice in society without getting their face blown off by the FBI or CIA or whoever else, was a good idea. But whenever you get, my dad used to say, if you play in a coal pile, you're going to get dirty. And that's what's happened. Partisans have come up, and now partisans want political power. And that's what the Libertarian Party has become, and to so many people, not to everyone. There are a lot of good people, our friend Patrick Smith being one of them, doing amazing work within the Libertarian Party and holding to his principles and being that voice, using that platform to reach statists who need to hear what he has to say. That's the use of the Libertarian Party that is acceptable, and in my mind. But, you know, now we have people that we want to be respectable, right? And saying, you know, in the state is not respectable. And so therefore you gotta play their game. No, you don't. That's a big disagreement. I know there are people who would disagree with that, and that's fine. I know that, you know, I'm not going to say that no good is done by that process. Like I said before, sometimes they're able to stop things from happening, but if you are there to legislate things, you have to do it. And I have a friend right now in Tennessee who is in the House of Representatives, the state house. And he has had to play ball on things he does not want to, because they force you to, because in Tennessee, the Republicans have a lockdown on government. Memphis is really the only like Democrat bastion. So the Republicans have a lot of power, and they just shut him out. If he doesn't do what they want, they will just shut you out, and they'll make you not effective at all in anything you want to do. And so therefore you're not even going to stay elected. So the fact that you have to be reelected makes you have to play ball. So he made a smart decision, I think, in saying, I have 3 subjects that these are my issues, and this is what I'm up here to do. And he ran on that. He told people that. But once he got in office, he realized there were things he was going to have to do other than those 3 things in order to get to those 3 issues. And that's just the dirty, twisted political system. It is what it is. And so I try to tell people that, you know, when people tell me, well, I'm just going to say no to everything. Okay, well, then you will be ineffective. And so you might as well not do it. You might as well take on the position I'm saying, is that work on changing culture, work on ignoring and nullifying the state, and you know, letting that be your way of trying to fight the power. But, you know, that way of doing things, in my mind, is you can only be so effective. People are never going to vote themselves free.
Never. I agree.
Yeah.
Did you had a bit of a political run there?
Yeah. So as I just went on this anti-political rant, yes, I did. I was kind of already out of the Libertarian Party. I was only in for like a year and a half. But they were having problems with ballot access. In Tennessee, it has some of the most stringent ballot access laws in the country. And I decided, okay, I'll join in with these guys, just because it's more of an F the Republicans for being such, you know, buttholes. I'm sorry, I'm trying to not ruin your show here with inappropriate language. But, you know, So I decided, well, I'm gonna do this. So like, I think it started out as like 20 or 25 people. It ended up being 17 that ran for governor, just to kind of, I wanted them to see there are people out here that aren't, you know, because they want you to feel like everybody, well, voting is your say. It's not your say. Don't believe that hype. But so I did. I ran for governor, and I came in 3rd place.
When was this?
Oh gosh, it was a couple of years ago.
Okay, not too long ago.
The last gubernatorial round here, and so I actively didn't run a campaign. I spent no money. The only money I guess I can say I spent is sending, you know, postage back and forth with all the stupid documents they want you to figure out every few months. And then I went, every radio program I was on, whatever, I would tell people, don't vote for me. Or somebody was, I'm voting for you. Don't vote for me. Don't vote for me for sure. and this is why you shouldn't vote. And I was on, you know, my friend at the station I used to work at would have me on his radio show in the mornings every Tuesday. And he called it Voluntary Tuesdays. And And we would go in there and we would talk about anarchism for 3 hours to Republican neocons in Knoxville, Tennessee. So it was amazing. And I got a lot of great feedback and response. And there are several people now who are voluntarists that weren't before. And I would use that platform to say, this is why the system's messed up. This is why you shouldn't vote. And over 5,000 people voted for me.
Yeah.
I was really shocked by that. I find it hilarious. I think it really points to the fact that the system it's messed up. There's problems with it when it's a popularity contest or whatever. So I appreciate everyone who did that. I think it was funny. Maybe it was, kind of a joke on people's part, but I thought it was fun.
Yeah. What an interesting experience. I mean, really,
you tell the grandkids.
Yeah. I mean, you're really getting yourself out there. I wanted to ask you, okay, so you're going to kind of take a step back from the Sherry Voluntary Show. Now, what all do you have going on? You've got another show as well, you said.
Yeah, Postcards from Somalia. It's really an inside baseball. It's not like, I would say Sherry Voluntary Show is trying to expose thinkers and people doing things as anarchists, that are anti-state into, like, it's to expose normies, so to speak, to the ideas. Whereas Postcards from Somalia is Alan Mosley of the Gold Standard and myself, and we're just mean anarchists on that show. Like, we just give our mean opinions. We kind of try to trigger people in a way, like we're just being us, but we might hype it up just a little bit because we want people to get over this idea that you have the right to police people and what they say, and you may not like it and you might find it hateful or whatever else, but damn it, you don't have the right to stop people from saying what they're going to say. You don't have the right to police people in that way. We're certainly not hurting anybody. And we just make fun of, politicians and stupid people. So
yeah, cool. Are you gonna keep that up?
Yeah, I am gonna keep doing that show. I don't have to put the time and effort into that show that I do, because that show is more like just our mean opinions. Like, it's and so it doesn't really take me a lot of research to do that. Whereas, having an academic guest on, I want to be able to ask them questions that really highlight what their work has been and bring that forth. So it takes a lot more work, but
yeah. Well, cool. Well, okay, Sherry, we'll wrap up. Last question though, okay. Goals and predictions for 2020.
Goals
and predictions. Goals for you, objectives. What do you see happening in your life for 2020? And if you want to throw in a few predictions.
Okay. So I would say my goal is to get my health. That's probably my main goal, back where it needs to be. And, mentally and physically, this past year has been a really rough one for me personally. So I'm looking to get back to where I need to be. The other goal I have is to reprioritize my life and get my children back as my son is turning 17 in a couple weeks, and he will probably leave home at 18 like I did. He's very independent. And so I want to make sure I'm spending time with him and as much as I can. He works and he's a young person with a life of his own. And my daughter, pardon me, is 9. And so just reorganizing my priorities. But I'd say those are my 2 biggest priorities for this year. Read some of those books that I have on the list that I've been putting on my
start
list.
knocking off that.
I'll do that when I have time.
Yeah. Start knocking off that to read list.
Yeah. And then probably I do want to get back into doing a show or something. Like, I really enjoy doing this, maybe another radio show, or I don't know, doing another, maybe being a co-host on another show, something like that. Would probably suit me better. I think that suits me better than actually having to be responsible for all of it. I'm not naturally a very responsible person. It's something I work and I strive to.
Well, at least you're identifying your imperfections, and that's the first step, isn't it? And then moving forward from there. You can't solve a problem unless you know it's there.
Right. And that's naturally my personality tends towards, I'm very charismatic and outgoing, and I'm motivated by fun. But if it's work, I'm like, like some work I find incredibly fun, and that's no problem. But when it's something, I tend to procrastinate. So I'm working on that stuff. And then my prediction is, boy, 2020 is going to be a headache. Anytime there's a presidential race, I hate it. Like, people are nasty and mean, and
Are
the real
you
viciousness
are you
comes
going to
out.
keep the TV off, or are you going to follow it?
My TV will probably, I don't watch a lot of TV, so my TV
Well,
will
you know what I
probably
mean. Are you gonna
yeah.
follow it, or are you just gonna just shut that out, and then
Right.
if it's important enough, you'll hear it through other venues?
That's sort of what I probably will do. If I'm doing a show, I might follow it a little more. But yeah, I'm sure I'll hear the highlights. You can hardly escape it. But yeah, that and I don't know. I think with it seems like to me like the Democrats are purposely trying to throw this election. I think Trump is gonna be reelected. I think it's gonna be not. I think it's probably gonna be less close than it was last time, because I don't see any Democratic candidate that comes close to being able to topple this monstrosity of Trump. And they're trying to put up their worst candidates. People are talking about Hillary running again, for God's sakes. Like, okay, who knows what goes through the minds of politicians? It's incredibly stupid stuff. But yeah, so I think that's my prediction, is that we'll have 4 more years of Trump, and which is good in a way, because I love, I came from the right, if you want to use that paradigm, and I'm more disgusted by them often than I am the left,
I know what you
because
mean. Better the devil you know.
yeah, well, at least I don't hear leftists, my friends, and I do have friends that are liberals. I don't hear them talking about the Constitution and individual rights and freedom and all those. They use the right uses the rhetoric of freedom and abandons it as soon as they want something. So at least these people are telling me up front, yeah, I believe in socialism. Yeah, I think the government should give everybody. They're honest about where they're coming from. Whereas I live in Tennessee. You get 2 years of free college now in Tennessee. That's socialism, guys, you Republican guys, but they want their handouts and goodies just as much as the other guy. They just want to be told this is more sensible. This is, responsible gun ownership, whatever the crap that they tell themselves. They just abandon those principles of, self-ownership. Every politician I ever interviewed told me they were a libertarian, and I would be like, no, you're really not. And here's why. But
Yeah. Well, cool, Sherry. Very good. Any plugins? What you got?
well, my show is
The Sherry Voluntary Show.
Yeah, it's still there. It's
got
still
it's your YouTube channel, right?
Yeah, and I would appreciate some subscribers. I've have almost 600 now. If I got it to 1,000, that could still be some monetization I could do, even if I'm not doing this show actively. So that'd be much appreciated. And my friend Alan Mosley is starting a new show. He's changing his old show to something else. So you guys should follow him. He's really smart. He's really funny, and it's going to be a good time.
In the meantime, are you guys still going to do postcards from Somalia?
Yes, and postcards from Somalia will still be around. And check that out. If you're a libertarian and an anarchist, you're going to enjoy it, I think. And you can get mad at us, and you can also laugh with us. We're pretty funny. So it's meant to be fun. It's meant to be, not too serious and blow off steam.
Cool.
We need that.
Yeah, you're right. There's so many shows out there. When I started, I've only started this. I started last April, and it's a learning curve. It's a learning process. I've only been doing this for a few months, and already when I look back at the earlier episodes, I'm cringing. So, you're just constantly moving forward from a tech point of view or whatnot. But one thing that ties into what you just said that I've learned so much is there are so many small-time, freedom-minded podcasters out there. That it's just it's really just ramping up, and that's
Yeah.
good. People are just getting fed up and becoming to realize that the system isn't working. Freedom's a good thing, and the system is the opposite of freedom.
I'm so glad you brought that up. Can I say one more thing? I know we're getting out of here.
Yeah, sure.
Support the damn shows you like, please. Like, don't just give the lip service. It takes money to do these things. I need to get paid if I'm going to spend that much time away from my kids. Bottom line, that's what I had determined. Like, I need to have some sort of income, because I get invited to lots of conferences. I get invited to speak places. I get invited to do things that I can't do because I don't have the money coming in from the show to pay for itself. And the people who invite me don't often have the finance. Like, they'll invite me and they'll cover like my food and my gas, or whatever, but they can't take care of what I need taking care, to get out there and spend the time doing it, whatever. So I'm not trying to come down on people, but I do want you, if you're not an eloquent person, maybe a podcast isn't the best thing for you. I have people contact me all the time. Hey, I'm thinking of starting a podcast. Any tips? I'm like, well, it's not enough for your friends to say, wow, you really know a lot. Like, that's what people think, a lot. I know a lot of people who start podcasts and then a couple months later they're done. Like, don't spend the money on that equipment if you don't really think you can make a good go of it. If you're not good at what you do, and sometimes it takes some practice. I get that, but please just support Chris. You like his show, support it. Throw him a few bucks if you can. Because these things, they're important. And I think that instead of having a million small shows that very few people listen to, if we could get a few shows really into the mainstream, boy, what a difference that would make. Because we need to be in front of normies. And that's one of my goals for anything else I do, is to get to the normies. That's who needs this ideology. And so that's what my goal is going to be, not to be how popular I can be amongst libertarians. Because look, we got plenty of celebritarians running around. We got plenty of people who we love and enjoy and say the message really well. We got to get them in front of the bigger world, the wider world. We're very marginalized. And so I would encourage people to support the programs that they really enjoy. And before starting
that they get value from, and that's the way it should be.
Starting your own podcast, really think about it, really understand that it takes a lot more work than you think. Sit down and really look out, because I spend a lot of time just trying to share stuff on social media that takes forever, and it's not a cash cow. You're not going to have money rolling in. Like, people tend to think that I make a lot of money from doing this. I don't.
Yeah.
So I would just encourage people to support the shows that they really like. And instead of saying, well, I'm going to be the guy who breaks, like, maybe you will, but that's very few people. So.
Very good. Yeah. Well said. I agree. I
don't want to discourage people
as a small time.
Speaking.
Yeah. As a small time podcaster. Yeah. I agree. Yeah.
Yeah. It's, speaking to people, there are many, you don't have to start a podcast to make an influence, to make a difference. Like, there are plenty of people I know personally in regular life who are doing things in their communities. That's what's really going to move people to. The point of a podcast, in my opinion, is to reach a wider audience, an audience that's not just libertarians. And you see some people trying to do that and maybe making some headway there. And that's wonderful. I support that. And if you're going to start something, start it with them, in mind of, I want to reach normies. How do I do that? And I think Candles in the Dark, just to bookend it, is a great thing. You guys, Lark and Rose, I think, is the best, the best person out there doing that kind of work. And, he's trying to get by still, so.
Yeah, he's out there really doing. Guys like Larkin Rose and Derek Bros are really just getting out there, getting their hands so dirty.
Support those guys.
Yeah, exactly. I subscribe to, for example, James Corbett, the Corbett Report.
Yeah, he's
his
really
model is ideal. He puts it all out there for free, and he says, "Look, if you appreciate my work, give us help us out.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he does very well. I mean, I get value from his work. There are others I subscribe
He does
to,
a great
Media
show.
Monarchy, Tragedy and Hope, the School Sucks Project. I get value from
Brett
these.
Vinot.
Now, I can't, if I had more money, there would be a lot I would distribute. I would love to win the lottery and just seriously really give the value to a lot of the work that these guys do that they deserve.
Right.
But yeah, well said, Sherry. We should wrap it up, I suppose. Wow, where does the time go? Yeah, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with me today. And I'm kind of going back and watching a lot of your older episodes. I'm really enjoying them. I listened to a few yesterday, and I like how you cover a wide range of topics, and everyone has a message. Everyone has something very unique to add that needs to be listened to, and that's kind of what I'm doing here. I have a varieties of people who have a message that needs to be heard. One last point is what you said was interesting earlier. I don't want to name names yet because it's not confirmed, but I'm right now talking to someone who's very mainstream and like a household name, but he's so fed up with the mainstream media that it's constricted. And now he specifically put a shout out that I'm looking for.
Who you're talking about.
Alternative. Well, we're emailing back and forth. It might happen. It's not confirmed yet. But he's so fed up with the alt media or the mainstream media. Now he's turning to the alternative media, I guess, to say what he needs to say. But that's an example of what's going on. The mainstream media is controlled, corporate controlled, narrative, literally controlled in every aspect. You really think
they're not our friends?
Do you really think if it comes from Netflix or Hollywood or corporate media, do you really think that, this is heavy? You're not going to get anything of value from that anymore. It's all controlled. It's lost. It's gone. It's gone.
Yeah.
You're only going to find real truth in the open sourced alt media of the internet. And they're trying, of course, to crack down on that. It's a constant battle. That could be a whole other episode, a whole other topic, the modern day book burning that's going on.
Yeah. Even the suppression that goes on Facebook, just with small time, like shows like mine.
Yeah.
It's a real thing. We've seen it. Alan and I commiserate about it all the time.
It's a rite of passage these days to get axed by Facebook, Right. I was just talking to Pete Quinones of the Free Man Beyond the Wall. He got punished for 30 days.
Yep.
Of course, Free Thought Project, Carrie Wedler. Anyway, I am about to do something very mainstream, despite everything I just said. I'm going to take my kid to go see the new Star Wars movie.
Fun.
Walking down the street where children play. For them it's just another day. The future's reflected in their parents' faces, who chose to stay on in this place. Well, they were born, went to school, got married with kids, like their grandparents before them did. Got to escape, before it's too late. Although today I could say that I really will miss the Buen Santa.
You've been listening to truthconduit.com with Chris McMillan. Go to the subscribe page and sign up to get notifications of the latest posts. And check out the support page to help keep it going.
Yeah, I've got a friend in Jesus Christ. I've got a friend in Jesus Christ, and Krishna and Buddha and my bartender.